Oh, so cool to be back with you, everyone. This is that Rugby Union Show. I'm Xola, and thanks for joining us for another live stream. I'm flying solo today, and hopefully Sim will be back with us next week. We had a great chat last time, and I think it's quite good to have one of those journo types stick around and share some opinions with. So I reckon we'll keep Shimmy around. We'll keep Sim around. Shimmy is another interview for another day. We'll definitely have him on at some stage. But it is pretty decent to be able to go on, talk about things, and have a bit of that back and forth as well. Which is why I want you to comment. If you have any questions, do post them. Love hearing from you guys. Give us a like, give us a share, a subscribe, and yeah, spread the word far and wide. It's absolutely amazing to be part of this online community, and really glad that you could join me today. I do say flying solo, but not quite. We had to shake things up a little bit. Robbie Fleck has just won the Varsity Cup with UCT. The Ikeys doing incredibly well to win in Stellenbosch down the motorway against the old enemy. So we managed to catch up with him, though I did have to record that interview earlier than our live show. So we'll play that out a little bit later. But what a wonderful moment it was to catch up with a bona fide Springbok legend and somebody whose heart is truly part of Cape Town, and he certainly has done well. And I think one of the big things that when it comes to coaching is everybody tends to think of coaching career as a fairly linear one, where you'll go from the smaller or the junior teams to the more professional to the senior sides. And Robbie's path has been quite different than that. It's gone all the way to the top because he was the Stormers coach back in the Super Rugby days. He lost that role, and now he's back coaching juniors and coaching in the Varsity Cup, something that he says has reignited that love for the game, which is, something that I think Swayze de Brain also alluded to. I think it gets very, very hectic for a lot of these guys, and you can lose the love for the game. You can sort of lose the wood for the trees. So really good to see him back on the field, back coaching, and well done to UCT. Go Ikeys Tigers! Really good to be able to clinch that back. But the big focus this week, I suppose, from a rugby point of view, is the URC. So that's what I'm going to be chatting about. And like I say, if you have any comments or questions, do post them. And it is the Bulls that lead the way in the of the SA teams at the moment. So a little bit of a hyper focus on them, their path to the knockout stages. We know that only 3 rounds of the round robin matches remain before the knockouts. So it is vitally important that the teams not only gun for a top 8 place, but they want to gun for a home quarter-final. And in order for that to be a reality, top 4 is pretty much what you're looking for. And you see the Sharks in 4th and the Bulls in 3rd. And this is what happened, of course, in the previous round. The Sharks, they should consider themselves lucky. It was a last-ditch try by Makazole Mapimpi that saw them over the line. The Lions will be desperately, desperately disappointed with losing to Benetton, especially considering that they're back home. They are at Ellis Park, and they will have wanted to finish off strongly. They are still in with a shout and a sniff of a place in the knockouts, but they're going to have to win the rest of their matches. And, you don't want to rely on other results going your way either. The Stormers, I think a very good win over Connaught. Is a tough Connaught side. Stormers would have wanted a bigger margin, but there's reason to celebrate because the Stormers are getting a lot of players back from injury. Sasha Feinberg Gomezulu scoring 3 tries. Wonderful to see him back from his injury, and he looks like he's top notch again. There's a bit of a selection headache as well for Dobbo, for for Paul Dobson, because he obviously has to consider the fly half role because Manny Lubbock is also back from injury. That's a pretty good headache to have, and one that I think Rassie will be keeping a close eye on. The Bulls, they'll be happy with that win, of course, over Munster, and they've completed, I suppose they've won every match that they've played in Ireland, which has not been done by a South African team before, and certainly I don't know when last that would have been achieved by any team to speak of. I think are starting to see a Bulls team that's on the up and up. They've dropped 1 or 2 results in the lead up to the knockout stages, but they are finding their strength again, and there must be a number of reasons, I think, for that. One of them, We know that they were really very good in the scrums. They always have been solid in the lineouts, and we saw that against Munster. Munster had a torrid time in the lineouts last weekend. But what they do have back now, the Bulls that they haven't had for quite some time, a fly half. They've got Ruan Nortjé back, and that to me makes all the difference. It doesn't matter how much you dominate the scrums. It doesn't matter how much you dominate the set piece or the lineouts, which they've been doing throughout the season. You have to get the points on the board, and in order for that to happen, you need to still be able to break down defenses despite your physical dominance or the dominance of your forwards. So it's good to see the Bulls have Ruan Nortjé back. I mean, the man unfortunately does suffer from injuries quite a bit. So I'm hoping he stays fit. He's 32 years of age. And when I thought of Ruan Nortjé's age as being over 30, I think a lot of us are guilty of thinking, oh, well, he's at the end of his career. But if you look around and you look at the other Springboks that are probably going to still sneak into the Bok team for the next World Cup in 2027, there are a couple of 30-plus-year-olds. And it's all about how well they condition you for the amount of rugby, the number of matches that you're going to play. And I think that's something that the Bulls have to consider. And also, it wouldn't hurt Rusty to have an extra person just in case another fly half goes down, just in case you don't want to change the game plan up too much. His kicking game was really very good, and he does what he does. He did what he does best. He orchestrated the attack, and that's what we wanted to see from the Bulls. So, they'll be very happy with that win over Munster. I saw Willem Strauss, the Bulls president, posting a tweet saying that they're the first team to win everything over the Irish teams. And yeah, they'll be eager to do it again. We'll take a look at the selection as well for the Bulls for this coming weekend. Jake White has opted to rest one or two players, but there's still a lot of strength in that team. They're up against Glasgow, as you can see there, and it's a very tough battle that they're going to have to face up against Franco Smith's side. Franco has done so very well with Glasgow. It is a repeat of last year's grand final. It was at Loftus Versfeld. It was Glasgow versus the Vodacom Bulls. Glasgow walking away with it, despite the Bulls having a 13-point lead at a stage during that match. This is the team that they are going with for the weekend. And, I've also picked out some key players, but you can see the changes there. And one that will fascinate Rusty Erasmus, I think, is that of Marco van Staden at number 8, because, of course, there is no incumbent Springbok number 8 at the moment. So he's got a lot to play for. Ruan Nortjé has been really very good, and he captains the team once more. And look out for those two locks, Van Heerden and Kobus Visa. Very strong pairing, still very young guys. The backs, a lot of firepower and excitement. As I mentioned, they've got a bona fide 10, and that makes all the difference for them. Seb de Klerk and Kane and Moody looking like they're really in good nick at the moment. Foster and Kriel also likewise. And Kriel, because of the absence of Goosen in the last month or so, or 2 months or so, was taking on the kicking responsibilities. And this is something that I like to see from the Bulls, is having a backup plan. So if Ruan Nortjé does go down, if he doesn't play the full 80 minutes, and you saw, of course, at the end of last week, that the kicking had to be passed on to another player. So that builds, I think, a little bit of depth. And that would be really, really good to see. It was Keegan Johannes who kicked the winning points for the Bulls last weekend, but we know that Kriel can do it as well. And on the bench, there's Wilco Louw, who you don't see there. Marcel Coetzee, who had a phenomenal barnstorming game and looking like he wants to find his way back into the Springbok lineup. That's, I think, how good he's been over the last couple of weeks, and overcame injury and a concussion scare as well. So well done to him for looking as strong as he does. Wilco Louw is also coming back, and he hadn't played last weekend, so that's good to see. And he adds immense value to that Bulls team. And I wonder if he's not on the bench so that he can possibly step in at 10, allowing Goosen to come off slightly early. That'll be an interesting one to see. Keegan Johannes, as I said, with his kicking boot, really very strong. Akafara Merva, we know how good he is off the bench. And Morne Smith as well, alongside Simpiwe Matanzima. I think it's a very good Bulls team. But as I said, there are one or two players who are missing from that lineup. And it will be a little bit of concern because they did have injuries, the Bulls, a little bit earlier in the season. It's the road to the quarterfinals. They don't have Cameron Hanekom, and I think he is arguably their best player. At least is my favorite bull at the moment. Just the way he goes about his business, the hard work he puts in. And Marcel Coetzee not starting, but at least Marcel has an opportunity to make a real impact off the bench. So I think Cam Hanekom, really big loss. But the Bulls still, I think, have plenty of firepower, and they should be able to put one over Franco Smith. Now, Jake White this week came out saying that he doesn't consider this a grudge match. And, that's the diplomatic talk that all coaches will have. But he is up against Franco Smith, who beat him in the final last year. And Franco Smith has been spoken about by so many different teams across the rugby world. I know that the Welsh have been sniffing around and seeing if he'd be interested in taking on a coaching job. A number of the URC teams are also said to have been looking around and wanting to have Franco Smith. The Japanese teams are always looking for the top coaches and players. And he's also been spoken to. We spoke about him, I think, in our very first episode as a potential candidate for the Springbok role when Rassie departs. He's done so well with Glasgow. He's a bona fide hero down in Glasgow. And I think he'll be confident that his team can put one over the Bulls, especially considering that it is the Bulls that are on the road. So quite a nice tussle, pretty big battle between South African coaches. And I think if the Bulls can win this one, come back home, I think they shoe in for a home quarterfinal. That's what you want, a home quarter, home semi. You want to finish as high up on the log as possible. And this is a very good opportunity. But between them and that quarterfinal place stands Franco Smith and the Glasgow Warriors, who really have been good. There are a couple of other teams that are guaranteed. The Bulls are already guaranteed a quarterfinal place already. I think Leinster are the others and Glasgow being the other team. Those are the only three teams with 3 rounds to go who are guaranteed off a quarterfinal. It's all about a home quarterfinal, as I say. But still in with a shout are the Sharks, who are in 4th, so they are technically in a quarterfinal spot. The Stormers are in with a shout. The Lions are still in with a shout, but they've got a lot of work to do. And we'll hope that things go their way and results go their way as well. I don't want to be too long-winded because there is a lot that I managed to speak to Robbie Fleck about, and I want to get into that interview. Only to say that there have been other bits and pieces, bobs and bits of news in the rugby sphere over the past week. The Stormers, I mentioned, they're returning stars, and Sasha Ngomezulu showing his great form and that he's back and in full flow. It was awesome to see. Eben Etzebeth also back for the Sharks, started for the Sharks, captained the Sharks, got yellow carded. So I suppose is back in every facet and every aspect of the game. And it is good to see him back. I also wonder how much management should happen with Eben now that he's back, because concussion we know can be tricky. We don't want to see a repeat of the Patrick Lambie type situation. So let's hope that he's being well managed. I'm sure he is. I'm pretty sure that Rassie will want to go into the international season with a fit Eben Etzebeth. And then Stephen Donald also came up with some crazy notion that he doesn't think that the quality of the URC is all that good. And he was saying this sort of, and I remember reading the article, and he actually said in it that he believes the quality and I just got to thinking, does that mean you have not necessarily been watching the URC? I mean, I know that Super Rugby is on at the moment, or Super Rugby Pacific is on at the moment, and I know that it always produces the fireworks. You always see incredible looking, free-flowing rugby, tries galore, left, right, and center. But you also need to play the other part of the game, and that's the part that includes the heavy boys up front. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with New Zealand this year, with Australia, especially with the British and Irish Lions coming up, and with Fiji are able to make advances as a result of them being included in Super Rugby. But I disagree with you, Stephen Donald. The quality of the URC is not, I think, as weak as you think it is, but time will tell. And the international season, I think, will settle those scores. But I did mention up front that I managed to catch up with Robbie Fleck. Well done to Flecky. Well done to UCT. Winning the Varsity Cup final, beating Marties is not an easy thing to do, especially at Stellenbosch. And they did that, beating Gabamba Flo's team in Stellenbosch and giving them back the trophy that they last held aloft. I think it was a decade ago. So it was a really special moment for them. But also, just speaking to Flecky was a special moment for me. Well, this is the part of the show that we had to record, and that's because our guest is an incredibly busy man. Not only is he out here coaching, winning titles, but he's also got a full-time job and also has to be, I suppose, a married man. Robbie Fleck, what an absolute pleasure. I haven't seen you in the longest time, Flecky. You're looking good. You're looking young. Being back in rugby is obviously great for you.
Xola, yeah, no, good to be here. Thanks for the invite. But yeah, lots of compliments there early in the discussion. Looking good and looking young. Don't know about that. This background doesn't suit me with my white hair and everything, but all good.
I was gonna say it's pretty decent camo, but I wanted to start with all the nice stuff first, get that shit out of the way, and then we can be honest.
Yeah, sure, no worries.
But thank you for people who haven't seen you since your Stormers days. What have you been up to? I mean, I know it's a very broad question, and it's probably a mile-long list. But how have you been occupying your time besides now that we've seen you on the field again?
Yeah, Xola, I took a year off from rugby once I've completed my Stormers gig, and I sort of took a bit of a 3 month sabbatical and just really enjoyed some time at home and with my family, and then started looking around for some opportunities in the business world. I was already involved with some of my family business and was really looking for something for myself, and I hooked up with my current partner who runs a short-term insurance brokerage, and he was at school with me, and with another gentleman, and I joined their company and been pretty much involved full time since then. And from a rugby perspective, I took a year break, and then joined Tom Dawson's squib at UCT. He phoned me up and said, "Would you like to get involved in rugby again?" And at that stage, I was probably still recovering from my my Stormers exit, and probably lost a little bit of passion for the game and a bit of confidence. But he was kind enough to get me involved at UCT at the Varsity Cup level, and involved me as a strategic sort of coach, so to speak, where I looked at the overall aspects of the game and all parts of the game, and helped coach coaches. And within a couple of weeks, that passion sort of came back for the game, and I knew that I was missing coaching and I missed rugby, and then I still loved it as much as I always did. And yeah, and then I've been coaching since then, with UCT for the last 4 years. And then this year they were going through a transition when Tom wanted to move on, and UCT offered me the head coaching role, which no, I took on board this year.
Yeah, Tom is a very busy man. He is UCT all the way. I think there's no job that he hasn't done for that team. And we'll talk about UCT, but I think a lot of people might completely underestimate the level of pressure that any coach of any South African franchise is under. And you were there in Super Rugby days. South African rugby was not really in the best place, just generally, so right at the top as well. And also, Super Rugby was very difficult. The travel to New Zealand and Australia. I mean, we've spoken about these things for years. Um, do you feel that you fell out of love with the game as a result of the pressure? Because as much as you might be enjoying it, or the guys might be enjoying playing, it does come down to results, and we're pretty hard South African fans.
Yeah, I think it was a combination of the pressures, and probably just being in it for some time. I was 10 years as a professional player, and then pretty much immediately went into 10 years as a professional coach. So it's 20 years in the game. I was nearing the end of my contract, and yeah, for sure the Stormers weren't doing as well as they should have done, and that falls on my shoulders as the head coach. Although I did enjoy some successes with Alistair Coetzee when he was the head coach, and then my first 2 years as a head coach were pretty successful. We played playoffs, but like you say, it is about results at that level, and and we weren't performing at the time, and it was probably time for me to move on. And personally, I felt that was the right time to move on. Like I said, I hadn't really experienced anything outside of rugby, so it had been 20 years of my life, and I loved every minute of it. But it was time to move on. And it was something that when I finally made that decision that I was going to move on, regardless of having opportunities to move abroad and coach abroad. I turned all those opportunities down just to see what life was outside of the rugby bubble, and I loved it. Like as soon as I'd made that decision, it was like a huge weight off my shoulders and my family, and I embraced that, and it was a new challenge that was coming my way. And, it was a good time to spend some time with family and friends, and really experience something else. So, and I embraced that. And, I'm glad that I did it, because it certainly showed a different part of life, and that rugby isn't everything, and that there is a life outside of rugby. So, and it actually made me come back a better coach, to be honest. Having a year out of the game and seeing things differently, coming back into the game, I actually became a better coach underneath another head coach, and working with other assistant coaches. You see the game through a different lens, and yeah, and that actually helped me actually become a better coach. Like, you got to remember, when I was the head coach of the Stormers, I was quite a young coach. I was still in my early
Yeah.
20s when I became head coach, and like you say, I wasn't quite prepared with those pressures that do come with a international job of that caliber. So now I could probably sit here and say, look, I'm probably now only looking for a job like that.
Yeah, I love that you say that, because this is a conversation I had with Dobbo probably 10 years ago. We'd gone for a lunch with Mr. Mallet, so there was, as you can well imagine, a lot of red wine involved. But speaking about the age, or the ideal age for a coach to take on a head coach role, particularly for a big or a provincial team. And at the time, there was interest. I think, I hope Dobbo doesn't mind me saying this, on a public platform, for him to be promoted into that senior role. And he opted to wait it out. And I think he stuck with the Currie Cup team for a number of years. And part of his reasoning then was, under the age of 55, it's very, very difficult, because you could lose your job literally in a flash. You might have to move. You've got kids at school. They might be very young. You've got a wife that works, and his teachers. And I had never taken into consideration what it means to actually take on the job. It's not just the pressure of winning. It's also about where you are, what life stage you're at. And I mean, I'm listening to you talk, and I think, sure, it must be so easy to lose sight of what you had. And you guys had an incredible group. And you mentioned Tuti. Alistair had a fantastic team. Yeah, there was so much talent in that group. But also, it was the first time that international teams were starting to pluck away the best South African players. I mean, you can't just lose a Chisholm Colby and expect that the team will be unaffected. And I'm really happy for you to have this time away from the game. Do you think that's something that a lot of coaches, maybe even players, should consider as a sabbatical, a break away from the game, from the pressures of the game, to reignite that fire that you speak of? And I've seen it with a couple of rugby players as well, who feel jaded after a long time and after the pressure. Take some time away, come back re-energized and reinvigorated. Is that something that you think maybe should come into coach training? And when you talk about coaching the coaches, this is something that people need to consider well before it happens in their career.
Yeah, spot on, Kola. I think that, Dobbo's view on that, and I remember discussing exactly the same thing with him. He was spot on, and he had the maturity and foresight to see something like that. But, you talk about sabbaticals, and there's only good that comes from something like that. A break is as good as a holiday, but you learn so much, from going to other environments. So there's something to be said about the way the New Zealanders go about giving their players a sabbatical. So they're essentially contracted by New Zealand Rugby, and then they get given the opportunity, like Jordy Barrett to go play for Leinster, or Ryoki Arnie to go play for Leinster, or Mwanga to go play in Japan. And I think, South African rugby is on a similar sort of mindset where they don't mind players going abroad and applying their trade elsewhere, different environment, different culture. There's less pressure, than playing in South Africa. They're learning from other coaches, from other players, and they actually come back better players. You think about Dion Fourie, I know Pollard is coming back now, and what value add he's going to add to the Bulls. It's Cheslin Colby, the likes, and I think it's one, it strengthens your career. You become better skilled, better equipped, more mature. Two, I think it does lengthen your career. And the same could be said of coaching. I certainly learned a lot having 6 to 12 months out of the game, just watching the game through a different lens, and just having, getting that passion just by watching rugby, and watching URC, and watching, Investec Champions Cup, and just understanding it, and not just being so internally focused and driven on Super Rugby like I was back in the day in Currie Cup. So there's so much more to it, and I believe that coaches need to move around, and coaches need to be assistants, and they need to be a defense coach, and then an attack coach, and then a kicking coach, just to get a better all-round understanding of the game. They need to become a forwards coach and a backs coach, in order to become a head coach eventually. And there's nothing wrong with being an assistant and then becoming a head and then going back to being an assistant.
Yeah.
To become a head coach. I believe the future of rugby is to have these strategic type of coaches, where you think about Joe Schmidt, the role that he performed for New Zealand during the last World Cup, with Foster, where he comes in and he's got this vast experience. He doesn't really deal much with players, but he's there just to help the other coaches and help strategize. And I believe all these positions are super important at a professional level, and coaches can't just see it as a fast track to being to the top. I was pushed in quite early as a coach and forced out quite early as a coach, but I'm actually, in hindsight, glad that it happened, because I'm a far better coach for it.
Yeah, no, I think Stuart Lancaster is another one who did that sort of head coach role, England role, back down to assistant coach, at a club. I don't think it's linear anymore. And you speak about your age. I mean, people might not know this because you were gray from when you were 30, and I'm as gray as you were then. Um, but obviously, it was a very young age, or stage of your life, your career, to take on that role. Did you have doubt, or did you feel like you were walking into like this settled group? Players know what to do. There's a strong leadership group and a very talented group, I think, when you took over the reins of the Stormers.
There was no doubt really, Kole, and for the reasons that you speak of, like we had a seriously talented Stormers side. There was a couple of players in there that I'd actually played with, in Skalkberger. He was still around, and we played together. So I had some strong bonds with some of the senior players, and there was a core group of young players that were coming through that I'd taken to the SA National Championships under 21s when I coached the Wales Head Coach of Province under 21s. And so I was super excited, bringing that sort of young, talented group through and exposing them at a young age to Super Rugby. I mean, obviously, that's quite a danger, to do, exposing young players at a serious competition like that. But I was super confident that we could do that. And it showed in the first 2 years, when I was head coach of the Stormers, that we made, I think it was 2 home quarterfinals in a row, or semifinals, whatever it is. But we badly lost that first quarterfinal to the Chiefs. I think it was, it could have been above 50 or 60 points to 13 or 10, whatever it was. I can't remember. But and that was a bit of a knock on the confidence. But I knew that we had the players, we had the environment. It had been built over a couple of years with Alistair and with Rassie. He was the previous director of rugby, so there was a lot of good pillars and fundamentals that were already in place. That all I had to do was just take over and really put my own sort of flavor to it. And as I said, for the first 2 years, but as we lost players to overseas, Chesnan left, Skulk left, Then the sort of soft underbelly was exposed a little bit, and things weren't going great behind the scenes in the boardroom and at the union. It was a troublesome time for Western Province Stormers rugby at that stage, and as a young sort of head coach, to try and deal with on-field issues, off-field issues, and try and manage upwards, downwards, sideways, at the age of 34 or whatever it was, that was quite a tough ask. So, and at that stage, yeah, those troublesome years continued for some time, even after my departure. It was troubled waters for anybody who was going to take over. But when Dobbo took over, he had that sort of experience and of boardroom politics and being able to manage, upwards, and he had the maturity to do that, and he was able to guide the team and the union through those troublesome times, which I feel I certainly wasn't mature enough or capable of at the time to do that. I think from a rugby point of view, I certainly was, a good enough coach, to do stuff on the field, but I certainly wasn't, mature enough to handle the stuff off the field, and that certainly affects everything within the team and the way we play.
Yeah, it's I think a lot of people might read the odd headline, maybe you see a story about something happening in the boardroom, but I don't think there is a full-on appreciation of how much it spills over onto the field in Western Province at the time. Big leadership battles, if I remember correctly, from president down, there was sponsor movement, there was all sorts of things happening. And what would you say is the split, Flaky, between the time you actually spend focusing on coaching as a coach versus having to deal with the politics of the job?
Well, certainly in my first 2 years as the head coach, Kesma was the director of rugby, and he was sort of dealing with any sort of situations that were happening off the field, which was perfect because that allowed myself and the rest of the management to focus on the rugby issues, and we were quite successful in that. But certainly towards the end, in the last 2 years, Ked actually left, towards the end of my last year, and I was pretty much left to my own devices there. And then suddenly you spending more time on the phone and more time, behind a computer and less time coaching on the field. And that's when I, started to really not enjoy, the coaching side of things. And it's you became more of a sort of politician, so to speak, or an administrator, trying to deal with issues that shouldn't even be on your plate, and like I said, Dobbo would have had to deal with that in his first year or two as well, where he's probably spending most of his time in meetings and on the phone and less time actually coaching on the field, which is what we are all employed to do. So look, if you're a director of rugby, you need to be able to handle both things on and off the field, but we were head coaches, and our focus was to run a successful rugby program, get the players to the best of their abilities, to get them to play a certain way, and also culturally get everyone aligned and I'm on the same page. And we were able to do that, when we had the freedom. But as soon as it became, off-field issues interfering with on-field issues, then it became a difficult job.
Yeah, bro, you're a better man than I am because, not that you were keeping the level of pressure away from us, but every time I interacted with you, whether it was an interview on the field or bothering you for another one before the match or after, you were pleasant. I felt like you were the only one of the coaches who actually smiled with me. So I'm grateful. Your personality's gone a long way, Flecky, and you know I think it's very much ingrained in how you grew up, where you grew up, even getting involved in the Cape Town Tens. I thought,
Really?
perfect fit. It makes absolute sense that Flick is involved in this. Is that still going?
Yeah, cool. It's still going. I don't play anymore, obviously, but I'm even nervous to go there for a beer these days. It's so wild. But we go, myself and Bob. We went this year again, and look, it's loads of fun. But that's the spirit of rugby, right? We created the tens so that we could showcase rugby and Cape Town and invite all our friends that we had made through our international careers to come and play some rugby. And even if they didn't play, just coming into a Cape Town for what it is and celebrate, our rugby lives. And I've always tried to bring that sort of philosophy of, the game is the game, and we all love rugby for what rugby is, and it's about friendships. And, yes, it's competitive and you want to win. But it's, for me, it's about having fun, and it's about expressing yourself, whether you're a coach or a player or even a fan. So I've got a huge, deep relationship with the game, and passion for the game, and whether that's running a tens tournament, and having fun that way, or coaching UCT and playing a brand of rugby that that we all love and can be proud of. And it's all coaching the Stormers, regardless of the pressures that were there. I loved every minute of it. I'm a super proud Western Province and Stormers, boy and man, whatever you want to call it. But that union was my passion growing up. I watched my whole life, all these superstars, the Cora du Plessis, the Michael du Plessis, and then I played with some, amazing characters and some amazing rugby players, while I was there. And yeah, rugby's been always part of my life. And but I've always had the view and the philosophy is that you've got to enjoy it and you can't take everything too seriously. And sometimes that was to my detriment. I got into trouble a lot, and probably didn't train as hard as I should have, and partied a little bit, too hard. But it was important that I had this philosophy, and that took the pressures away, and really saw the game for what it is. And it's about building, friendships that, last forever. And yeah, and playing in the game and showcasing your skills that you were blessed with. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing I love most about rugby is you make a friend through rugby and they'll be a friend for life. And it doesn't matter where in the world they come from. It doesn't matter who they played for, who they support, who they coached, whatever the case is. I think the game is such a unifier. And also, you do touch on it, and I wonder what you feel about it now, because I felt for a while that maybe we wanted to be a little bit too professional too quickly. And I know that sounds wrong. Um, but sometimes I felt like we lost the wood for the trees, Guys were very focused, hyper focused on strength and conditioning and this, that, and the other. And then everyone's got a GPS tracker because it's the latest thing, and almost forget to have fun in the midst of all of this. Is it possible to, in this modern era of the game, this professional era, to still balance those things, to still enjoy the game for what it is, um, fundamentally, one that brings people together that everybody can play and enjoy, versus need to be professional at all times? Can you square that?
Yeah, I think that at international and professional level, it has to be high performance. I mean, is what the game demands. Is a huge amount of money and stakeholders involved in the game nowadays, and it needs to be taken seriously. I have no doubt, that's what's going to happen. But there are still coaches around, and especially who come from my era, the Scott Robertsons and the Rassie Erasmuses and the like, where they still believe that connecting, pre and post is important with your fellow, player and opposition. And I still believe there's a place for that. And as you say, you make friends for life. And I've got some mates that I played with in Bath that I'm still, very close with. Opposition, Christian Cullen, the likes, we still have the odd chat and the odd beer whenever we see each other. It's important you see Justin Marshall and Andrew Mertens and your own players, that you played with in South Africa, that those connections weren't just made on the field. They were made off the field as well, and in social environments and in relaxed environments. So I firmly believe that, the way the game is going, you have to have that high performance and serious professionalism around it, and nothing should change in that regard. And because it's only going to get tougher, to play at an elite, level. But I still believe that culturally, it's important that you connect, and that it's so critical that you can share a beer and or a Coke after the game with your opposition, and build friendships and maintain that. And I think they've got that right, to be honest. If I look at Sia and the relationships that he's got with these, the Kiwi, folk that he plays against, and I still think it's really important, even to the youngsters today, that they are building relationships in a highly professional environment.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree, and I hope it doesn't get lost. And I understand when it comes to high performance, there is no time to waste. Every little bit of time that you've got available for coaching matters. But I do think a bit of balance will go a long, long way. Haven't even had time to talk about your own playing career, so we'll gloss over it. But I do remember your try against the All Blacks. It'll always be special to me. I played in a number 13 jersey at school, and you were a bit of a hero for the likes of me at the time. And you're not that much older than me, and I don't want to take off my cap because we'll figure it out. Uh, but I'm going to fast forward past your career to what you're doing now. UCT. You mentioned Tom Dawson Squibb, fantastic guy, and like I say, Mr. UCT. You must have really enjoyed this, like taking away from the uber professional setup at Western Province. And I don't say this lightly because Varsity Cup rugby is very professional in comparison to what we used to see back in the day. To have a bunch of young guys, to know that you can guide them in more than just what happens on the field, that must be really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite refreshing, actually. It's what's happened. I started with Dobbo in 2008, and we coached Varsity Cup together in its first year, and we made a final. And there it was very, very student driven. I mean, we had, as Dobbo, Dobbo can do lots of parties and lots of, culture building sessions, and less training. But and it worked, and we had a bunch of students who were there not really to play professional rugby, so to speak. They were just there to have a good time. And I learnt a lot from that, in being in that environment I loved. And that was actually my first sort of coaching gig and stepping stone to professional rugby. Rassie Erasmus, after my first year with Dobbo, called me up and said, would you like to come and do the attack for the Stormers in Western Province, obviously, which I took. But and then I was thrown in a fully professional environment. But the success of the Varsity Cup is that it is a very, very tough, and it's an excellent competition. The level of rugby is of a high caliber. The level of coaching across the board is of a high caliber. So you are really involved in high performance environments. But the trick is this, is that, we got to remember that these guys are students, and they've got families and they've got girlfriends, they've got other parts of their lives they've got to study. First and foremost, they are there to study and get a degree. The day that Varsity Cup becomes too professional and too rugby driven, and then these kids are failing at university and they're actually not even passing and getting the degrees, which is the whole point of it in the beginning. I think we're failing as a competition, and it was heading that way at one stage where it was becoming too professional. And like I said, what Tom brought in, 4 or 5 years ago, he brought in, a huge cultural side to it, and a high performance side to UCT. UCT's got serious challenges in terms of budget and facilities and whatnot, and it needed a change, and that's what he brought. What needed to happen next was to marry a style of play that matched that culture, and had to be the IQ way and the IQ style, and that's all about expression and running rugby and being brave in what we do. But they also had to be balanced, and as I said, these are kids, and they're there first and foremost to get a degree, and we mustn't lose
Yeah.
sight of that. So, and the third component of that, they are students and they need to have fun, and they need to be a student, and I think that's what we got right, now, is that we got that combination of a high performance environment, a brand and a style of play that matched, the culture. And then we allowed them to be students, and so that they can get their degrees and they can have fun and be silly and, do whatever, students do, like we were. And I think, when we've got those sort of three aspects right, then it actually created the perfect environment. And that's what they thrived in. And that's what worked for UCT. I'm not saying that it's going to work for others, but it certainly worked for us.
Yeah, no, it is. It's a very different culture from the boys down the end too, and I think hopefully Kabamba Flows is still talking to you after that final. But it is a very different culture at Stellenbosch, because they do have a massive rugby club. And they seem to have a lot of players that come from elsewhere, whereas I find just down the road at UCT, a lot of the boys are very Cape Town centric. Born in Cape Town, played, went to school in Cape Town. Not to say that there aren't ever, there always are kids who come from elsewhere in the country, but I think you're able to create a culture that I find quite unique from a lot of most of the Varsity Cup sides. And I don't know if that's just a Cape Town thing. I don't know if it's a UCT thing. I kind of am leaning towards it being more of a UCT thing. Um, but to be able to overcome a team like Marty's, and I'm not going to say they should have automatically walked it because they've got the facilities, this, that, and the other. But it must still be quite special to get one over the old enemy.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, it's not often that UCT beats, Marty's. As a player, when I played for UCT, I don't think I ever beat Marty's once. Maybe the Craven side back in the day, but it's coaching at UCT. I think we've probably beaten them in my 8 years in total of working for UCT, or 7 years, whatever it is. I think we beat them twice. So it's always a big feat for us, and especially at the Donny Craven, which doesn't, which actually never happens. So it is hugely satisfying, but what's more satisfying is the way we played, and the way we went about our things. So it's the results for us obviously was special, but we sort of really judged ourselves every week on our style and not on about results. And it was very important for us to play a brand of rugby and that we enjoyed and that we could express ourselves. And if we were doing that every weekend, we felt that the results would follow after that. And as the competition went on, we got better and better. To talk to the type of player that comes to UCT, what you alluded to early on, it's a whole lot of southern suburbs boys that come from a similar schooling background, in the southern suburbs of Cape Town, and that's what the bulk of the side is probably made up of. But we do, get in, some outsiders. It's the success of the program over the last couple of years is that we've had a couple of guys come from Polris and Paul Jim, which obviously add, a different dynamic to both the culture and the way we play. And we obviously do get a couple of guys from Hilton and Michaelas that and St. John's that come into the makeup. So it really is a bunch of guys that come there that are first and foremost driven by their academics, and rugby is just part of something that they want to experience at UCT. They want to experience a little bit of a high performance sort of professional semi-pro environment, but more importantly, they want to play a style of play that they can be proud of and they can be emotionally attached to and have fun with. And that's how we found that we've attracted more players from outside of the southern suburbs now. Is the way we play the game, and suddenly we get a lot more phone calls from post grad students from Wits or Chumlas or Tuckies, whatever, who want to come down to Cape Town, have a year in Cape Town, and want to play for the Ikeys Tigers. So it's a big part of our recruitment, our culture, and our style of play. And because, like I said, we don't have the funds to attract these guys to come. But the bottom line is this: is that an Ikeys Tiger, the man, is a hardworking, humble guy who likes to have fun, who wants to learn both on and off the field. We give them a lot of freedom. We give them a lot of responsibility as well. So it's an environment where they can grow as men, independently and together. So it really is a unique environment of guys who are prepared to go the extra mile, to have a bit of fun and play a brand of rugby that they love.
And I also know you're a very busy man, but the one thing that I'm going to leave with you, Flecky, is one, you are a mensch. Always enjoyed just spending time with you and being in your presence and just enjoying the game through your eyes. Two, there is a golden thread that I found runs through Cape Town and UCT in particular. And not to say that the other varsities don't have the same, they do, but a very different culture. And I remember the personalities, and particularly the ones that we lost along the way, because there's this encapsulation of what Ikeys are all about. And, Nick Costa, Tiger Backs, these names are forever etched in my mind, not because they became superstars, but because of how they embodied the game of rugby. I don't know if I'm making too much and too heavy emotionally of this experience of Varsity Cup rugby, but that's just how I see it, and it makes me really happy to know that you are there, taking care of these kids and looking after that history and that culture, and you'll make sure that what those guys achieved in the past will continue to live on. So it's a very special place to watch rugby, very special place to play rugby, and well done, Flecky, for just getting back in there. We love it.
No, thanks, colleague. It's like I said, that sort of culture and that legacy has been built over time. And you mentioned some great players of the past, and I think that's the attraction to UCT is the IQ way. And the IQ way is not just a brand of rugby; it's a cultural thing. And these guys come here to yes, to study, but they've come here for a life experience. It's a journey, it's a story. We're making stories every day, there, and all these kids that come through our program and come to the club, they leave here in a better place, and they love, UCT. They want to come back, they want to support. I mean, to put into perspective, when I was the Stormers coach, obviously when we did well, there was a lot of sort of, accolades and congratulations and whatnot, but never have I experienced anything like I have in the last couple of days post the UCT win against the Marties. The support and that UCT has got, from across the globe, just people saying amazing stuff, and it's because it's a really special place, and there's something special about it. I can't quite put my finger on it, and every coach says the same thing. What is it? What happens at UCT? You can't really explain it. You can try your best, but you won't get it right. It's just it's just a place where special stories and memories are made, and that's what it's all about at the end of the day.
No, Flecky, thank you so much for that. I look forward to catching up in Cape Town over a beer, hopefully at the Tens. You're an absolute legend. Thanks for your time. We'll chat again and hopefully have an opportunity to even move the conversation on to the Springboks and where we're at. There's so much rugby chat I'd like to get through, but I know you're busy. So I am appreciative of you taking this time to chat to me, and hopefully we'll do it again soon.
No, brilliant. Thanks, Corda. I enjoyed chatting.
Cheers, Flecky. Have a good one.
Cheers. Thanks, Paras.
Right, well, with that, we're going to go, I suppose, back to the studio where I am. Yeah, and I am back in the studio. I didn't do a quick wardrobe change. That was Flecky talking to me yesterday, and so wonderful for them. Their first title in 11 years, and I think a well done to Ntokozo Makaza, the wing of UCT. Who I think scored 2 tries, 23 points, player that rocks, player of the season, and it's a second year playing for UCT as well. So definitely one of the talents that are unearthed at a team like UCT. But really appreciative of Flecky giving us the time. He is a busy man, trust me. I've been trying to get hold of him the entire week, and he's just got business this side, coaching that side. But we'll try and get him back on when we have the opportunity, because I want to talk about the centres that the Springboks have and the options that Western Province seems to have at the moment. But we aren't necessarily looking into Province this time round. It's all been about the Bulls, and that's going to be our big focus for the weekend. And I'll definitely report back when I'm back on next week. Thanks again for joining us on the live stream. And next week, I have spoken to, and hopefully will join us, Gurthro Steenkamp, former Springbok prop, former Springbok Player of the Year, or South African Player of the Year, who's currently in La Rochelle. And is a scrum coach there, and he spent a lot of years now in France, having played there and retiring there. And it will be interesting to have somebody with a little bit of inside knowledge about French rugby, the French culture, and what they're trying to achieve. And here he is, busy coaching their forward pack, which is probably the one that's closest to the Springboks in terms of strength at the moment, and maybe the New Zealanders in third. Stephen Donald won't want to hear me say that. But they really have done well. They've got their own bomb squad. So to talk to somebody who's in the know and has coached some of these guys, I think will be really interesting. If you do have any questions for Gurthro Steenkamp, hey, let us know. It's always a pleasure to be live on this channel. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks again to Flecky. Well done to UCT. Good luck, not just the Bulls, but the Sharks, the Lions who want to turn things around, and the Stormers as well. Also, still gunning for a top place in the URC. And hopefully, Sim will be joining us as well, so we can talk about the South African situation in the URC next week. So make sure you don't miss it then. I'm Xola, and this has been That Rugby Union Show. Cheers, everyone.